My name is Michael and I'm 31 now. What happened to me on the Appalachian Trail in the fall of 2019 is something I've never fully been able to explain. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to. I'd been planning this hike for months, a solo trek through a section of the AT in West Virginia, about 40 miles over 4 days. I'm an experienced hiker, done plenty of trails before, always prepared. Good gear, maps, emergency beacon, the works. The first 2 days were perfect. Clear weather, beautiful fall colors, well-marked trail. I saw a few other hikers during the day, exchanged nods and brief hellos, but mostly it was just me in the mountains. On the third day, around mid-afternoon, I took a wrong turn. I don't know how it happened. I've been over it in my head 1,000 times. 1 minute I was following the white blazes that marked the trail, and the next I was on a path that looked similar but felt different somehow. The trees were denser here, older. The canopy blocked out most of the sunlight, and everything had this greenish underwater quality to it. I checked my GPS, but the signal was weak. The elevation reading kept jumping around, and the map showed me in an area marked as unmapped terrain. I knew I should turn back, retrace my steps, but I'd been walking for maybe 20 minutes, and I told myself I'd just go a little further to see if the trail reconnected with the main route. That's when I saw the cabin. It was set back in a hollow maybe 50 yards off the path. Old, really old, with weathered grey wood and a sagging roof. The windows were dark, most of them broken, and the front porch had partially collapsed on one side. Something about it made my skin crawl. But I was also curious. Abandoned structures on the trail aren't uncommon, old homesteads from before the area became protected land. I figured I could check it out, maybe take a few photos and then head back. I walked down toward it, my boots crunching on the carpet of dead leaves. As I got closer, I noticed something that made me pause. The cabin wasn't abandoned, at least not completely. There was smoke coming from the chimney, just a thin thread of it, barely visible against the grey sky, but definitely there. I stopped about 20 feet from the porch. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone home?" No answer, just the sound of wind moving through the trees. I stepped up onto the porch, carefully testing the boards before putting my full weight on them. The front door was slightly ajar, and I could smell something coming from inside. Something cooking maybe, or burning. "Hello?" I tried again, louder this time. "I'm a hiker. I got turned around, just wondering if you could point me back to the AT." Still nothing, but I could hear something now. A faint sound, rhythmic like humming. Someone humming a tune I didn't recognize. Every instinct told me to leave, to back away from that door and get the hell out of there. But I didn't. I don't know why. Curiosity maybe, or stupidity. I pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The interior was dim, lit only by the grey light filtering through the broken windows and the orange glow from a small fire in the stone fireplace. The room was filled with stuff, not furniture but things. Objects hung from the ceiling on strings, bones mostly. Animal bones, I told myself. Deer skulls, bird skeletons, the curved ribs of something larger. The humming was coming from the back of the cabin. A doorway led to what looked like a second room, and I could see movement in there, a shadow shifting against the wall. "I'm sorry to intrude," I said, my voice coming out shakier than I wanted. "I'm just looking for the trail." The humming stopped. The shadow in the other room went still. Then a voice spoke, not from the doorway, from all around me, like the cabin itself was speaking. "You're far from the trail." I spun around. An old woman stood in the front doorway, the one I'd just come through. She was small, hunched, with long grey hair hanging in tangles. Her clothes were the colour of bark and moss, like they'd grown on her instead of being made. Her eyes were the worst part, not just pale but reflective, like an animal's eyes catching light, except there was no light to catch. "I know," I said, forcing myself to sound calm. "I got turned around. If you could just point me in the right direction." "No one comes this far by accident," she said. Her voice had a strange quality to it, like it was coming from somewhere other than her throat. "You were called." "I wasn't called. You were called," she repeated more firmly this time, "and now you have to pay the toll." My hand went instinctively to the can of bear spray on my belt. "I don't want any trouble. I'm just going to leave." I started backing toward the door, but she moved faster than I thought possible. One moment she was in the doorway, the next she was standing right in front of me. The air between us turned cold, like something had pulled all the warmth out of the room. "You can't leave without paying," she said. I shoved past her and ran, burst through the front door, stumbled off the porch, and sprinted back toward where I thought the path had been. Behind me, I heard her laughing. Not a normal laugh. Something high and brittle that didn't sound human. I ran for what felt like forever. My lungs burned, branches whipped at my face, and I kept expecting to feel her hands grabbing at me from behind. But when I finally stopped and looked back, there was nothing. Just trees and shadows and the fading light of late afternoon. It took me another 2 hours to find the main trail. I don't know how I did it. I just kept walking, kept moving, following my gut until I finally saw a white blaze on a tree. I hiked until dark, then set up camp and barely slept. The next morning I packed up and got off the trail as fast as I could. In the weeks after, I tried to find that cabin again, looked at maps, satellite images, even contacted the Park Service. Nothing. No structures, no records, no hollow in that area at all. Maybe I got turned around worse than I thought. Maybe dehydration made me see things. But I still have the scratches on my face from running through those branches. And sometimes, late at night, I feel that same cold, like the air around me is being pulled away. I don't hike alone anymore. And I don't take unmarked paths because I think some places in these mountains exist outside the maps, and whatever lives there doesn't forget visitors. My name is Emma and I'm 27. I grew up in Pennsylvania, hiking the Appalachian Mountains with my family since I was a kid. So when my best friend Kate suggested we do a section hike in North Carolina during spring break of 2021, I didn't think twice about it. We'd planned a 3-day, 2-night trip through a relatively easy section of trail, nothing too challenging. We were both in decent shape, had good gear, and the weather forecast was perfect. The first day was beautiful. We made good time, chatted and joked, took photos of wildflowers blooming along the trail. By late afternoon, we reached our planned campsite, a small clearing near a creek with established fire rings and a few flat spots for tents. We weren't the only ones there. There was one other tent already set up, but we didn't see anyone around. We figured they were probably out hiking or exploring. We set up our own tents, filtered some water from the creek, and started preparing dinner. As the sun began to set, we heard voices coming from down the trail. At first, I thought it was the person whose tent was already there, maybe coming back with some other hikers they'd met. But as the voices got closer, something about them made me uncomfortable. There were at least 3 distinct voices, maybe more, but they weren't having a conversation. They were all talking at once, overlapping each other, and none of them seemed to be responding to what the others were saying. Kate looked at me with a confused expression. Are they arguing? "I don't know," I said. "Maybe they're just excited. Some people get loud on the trail." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it, because these voices didn't sound excited, they sounded wrong, flat and emotionless, like people reading from a script without any feeling behind the words. The voices got closer and closer, until they sounded like they were right at the edge of our campsite. But nobody appeared. Kate and I stood there, frozen, staring at the tree line where the trail emerged into the clearing. The voices continued, all talking over each other, saying things I couldn't quite make out. Words that sounded almost like English but not quite. Or maybe they were English but the rhythm was off. Then, abruptly, they stopped. Complete silence. Even the normal forest sounds, birds, insects, the creek, had gone quiet. "What the hell was that?" Kate whispered. Before I could answer, we heard footsteps, heavy footsteps on the trail, coming toward us. But we still couldn't see anyone. The footsteps entered the clearing. We watched as the tall grass near the trail entrance bent and swayed, like someone was walking through it. But there was nothing there, nothing visible. The invisible footsteps crossed the clearing, passing maybe 10 feet from where we were standing. I could hear the crunch of leaves, the snap of small twigs. Kate grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging into my skin. The footsteps reached the other side of the clearing and continued into the woods. We listened as they faded away, heading up the trail in the opposite direction we'd come from. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then Kate said, in a shaky voice, "We're leaving right now." "It's almost dark," I said. "We can't hike in the dark. We'll get lost." "I don't care. I'm not staying here." I wanted to argue with her, wanted to say that whatever we'd just heard was probably explainable, that hiking at night was dangerous, that we were being irrational. But I couldn't, because I didn't want to stay there either. We packed up our tents as fast as we could, stuffing things into our backpacks without bothering to organize anything. We were just zipping up our packs when we heard it again. The voices, coming from the direction the invisible footsteps had gone. But now they were louder, angrier, and they were moving back toward us. "Run," Kate said. We grabbed our packs and ran down the trail the way we'd come, our headlamps bouncing wildly. Behind us, the voices grew louder, and now they were definitely saying words we could understand. "Come back. Don't leave. Stay with us. Join us." All in that same flat, emotionless tone, like someone had recorded different people saying those phrases and was playing them on a loop, but slightly out of sync. We ran for maybe 20 minutes, which on a hiking trail at night with full packs is absolutely exhausting. Finally, we couldn't run anymore. We stopped, doubled over, gasping for breath. The voices had stopped following us. The forest was quiet again, except for our panting, and the normal night sounds slowly returning. We hiked for another hour, using our headlamps and moving as carefully as we could. Eventually, we found another campsite, this one right next to the trail, and more open, less surrounded by thick forest. We set up our tents again, but neither of us slept much that night. Every sound made us jump. Every rustle in the woods had us sitting up, straining to hear if the voices were coming back. They didn't. The rest of the night was quiet. The next morning, we packed up and hiked out. We were supposed to have 2 more days on the trail, but we were done. We got to the nearest trailhead and called for a ride. In the weeks after, I looked online, found mentions of things people hear on the trail, voices, footsteps with nothing attached to them. One post mentioned an old mining accident in that valley. 1952, 17 men trapped when a tunnel collapsed. They say the rescue crews could hear them calling for days, but they never found a way in. The voices stopped on the 4th day. I don't know if that's what we heard. Kate thinks so. She says it explains everything, but it doesn't explain why the voices knew our names, or why they were trying to keep us there. My name is David, and I need to tell you about something that happened to me on the Appalachian Trail in 2020. I've told this story to a few people, and most of them think I got dehydrated or had some kind of mental break. Maybe they're right, but I know what I saw, and I know what I felt. I was doing a solo through hike, Maine to Georgia. I'd been on the trail for about 3 months, was somewhere in Virginia, making good progress. That evening, I was hiking later than I should have been, trying to reach a shelter I'd marked on my map. As twilight settled in, I finally saw the shelter through the trees. It was one of the 3-sided structures common along the AT, basically a covered platform with an open front, meant to sleep maybe 6 to 8 people. But as I got closer, something felt off. The shelter looked older than it should have, more weathered, and there were no other hikers around, which was unusual. In my experience, the shelters were almost always occupied by at least a few people, especially during peak hiking season. I climbed up onto the platform and dropped my pack. The shelter had a musty smell, like it hadn't been used in a long time. I pulled out my headlamp and looked around. That's when I noticed the logbook was missing. Every shelter has a logbook where hikers sign in, leave notes, share trail conditions. But this shelter didn't have one. There wasn't even a nail or hook where one would normally hang. I told myself it had probably been stolen. People sometimes take them as souvenirs, even though they're not supposed to. I was exhausted, so I decided to stay anyway. I set up my sleeping bag, ate a quick cold dinner, and settled in for the night. I woke up to the sound of voices, not the voices from the valley like in the last story. These were normal voices, conversation, laughter, the sounds of people moving around unpacking gear. I opened my eyes and saw 3 people on the platform with me, 2 men and a woman, all probably in their 30s or 40s. They were dressed in older hiking gear, nothing modern, more like what people would have worn in the 70s or 80s. "Hey," I said groggily. "Sorry, I didn't hear you guys come in." They turned to look at me, and that's when I felt it. That wrongness again, but much stronger now. Their faces were too pale, their eyes too dark. And when they smiled, their mouths moved a half second after the sound came out, like watching a video with the audio slightly out of sync. And their shadows didn't move with them. They stayed in place while the figures shifted and swayed. "We've been here the whole time," the woman said. Her voice sounded hollow, like she was speaking from inside a well. "No, you haven't," I said, sitting up. "I was alone when I went to sleep." "Were you?" one of the men asked. He tilted his head at an unnatural angle, like his neck was broken. "Are you sure?" I scrambled out of my sleeping bag and grabbed my pack. My hands were shaking, but I managed to stuff my sleeping bag inside and zip it up. "Where are you going?" the woman asked. "It's not safe to hike at night." "I don't care," I said. "I'm leaving." "You can't leave," the other man said. His head tilted at that wrong angle again. "This is where you stay." I jumped off the platform and started walking. Fast, then running. Behind me, I heard them following, not running, just walking, but somehow keeping pace. I started running. Branches grabbed at my clothes and my pack. I tripped twice, scraping my hands on the rocky trail, but I didn't stop. I just kept going, my lungs burning, my legs screaming. I ran for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Finally, I saw lights ahead. Another shelter, and this one had real people. I could hear normal conversation, see the warm glow of a campfire. I stumbled into the clearing, and 3 hikers looked up at me in surprise. "Hey, you okay, man?" one of them asked. I turned and looked back down the trail. Nothing. No figures following me, no voices calling out. "Yeah," I said, trying to catch my breath. "Yeah, I'm fine, just had a weird experience back there." They invited me to sit by their fire, gave me some water. I told them about the shelter I'd stopped at, described where it was. One of the hikers, an older guy who'd been on the trail for years, went quiet when I described where I'd been. "If you slept there and made it out," he said slowly, "you're lucky. Most don't." He wouldn't say anything else, just stared at the fire. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I kept hiking south, but I checked my maps more carefully after that, made sure every shelter was current and marked, because that night taught me something. These mountains have layers. Most people see the official trail, the marked paths, but some people see the other paths, the forgotten places, and the things there aren't always what they seem.